Hi guys and welcome back. Thanks for watching This Old Thing. I'm Jessie Sage and today we're reading The Girl in the Centerfold by Surrey Marshe, and we are reading Chapter 7, Strangers in Paradise. But if you need to go back or want to go back and check out all of the chapters, I put them all together in a playlist so it'll just play all the way through. You can start with one if you want, down in the info box below. But if you're here and you want to listen, every chapter sort of stands on its own as an interesting little essay about Playboy history. It wasn't meant to, but they're all just super interesting little snapshots of this world. So welcome everyone, get comfy. I have some chamomile tea and let's get reading. Chapter 7, Strangers in Paradise. My second day at Hefner's mansion began with the most fun thing that had happened so far, breakfast in bed. I'd never had breakfast in bed. It was marvelous. A Negro waiter brought scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice, and tea on a little bed tray. Groovy, just groovy, and I felt very spoiled. For just a second, I thought of changing my mind and sending him back for Cocoa Pops or maybe pancakes, but that would have spoiled the fun. I think she's referring to those kids that made her make, all those breakfast things. Munching my toast, I felt encouraged. Maybe my adventure in Hefnerland would turn out to be an adventure after all. Then I remembered I was to go to the Playboy offices to start posing in the buff again, and my enthusiasm vanished. Boobies up, tummy in, fanny out, look sexy. What did Pompeo Posar need more photos for? Kodak could declare a dividend on the film he used in New York. Skin is skin, and boobies are boobies. How many pictures were required? If ever a subject spoke for itself. Oh hell. My good mood was gone, but I was determined not to be a child about posing. I reviewed all the arguments I'd been giving myself. I was being paid, and I'd agreed to do it. I couldn't back out now, so I'd better act as I was expected to. I, Surrey Marshe, an unknown, was about to receive a big spread in a big magazine. I would be launched on a big career as a model, actress, singer, movie star, something. Didn't all the girls think I was so lucky? Didn't Gwen Bayer urge me to do it? Besides, what was wrong with posing in the nude? It was art, like a painting. Nudes had always been great art. What was dirty about it? Wasn't the body a natural thing? And what was I afraid of? I'd already posed for Pompeo Posar. He was a nice man. He looked upon me like a pig, well, maybe a piece of furniture. What did it matter if I posed for him again? I was unaware that most of my arguments were questions. I dressed, ordered the limousine, and went to the Playboy offices on East Ohio Street. If Hefner's house is the heart of the Playboy empire, the magazine offices, Playboy was just then starting to move into an appropriate skyscraper with a big beacon on top. The magazine offices were the elbow. From the outside, the Ohio Street building was not much to marvel at, the yellow brick somewhat on the dingy side. From the inside, the impressions were a bit different. A great many people worked there. All were young. All were slender. The girls were uniformly stacked. They all had long lashes and black eyelids. As a girl who doesn't use much makeup, it struck me that enough mascara and eyeshadow was used in that building to paint the Great Pyramid of Cheops, with enough left over to make the Sphinx look like Elizabeth Taylor. Everyone was very busy. The men seemed constantly hunkered over desks, cuffs rolled up, pencils stuck behind their ears. The girls raced from place to place, armloads of manila folders pressed against their maiden forms. Typewriters clacked, phones rang, doors opened and closed. I felt utterly useless. All I knew how to do was say, "Good afternoon, welcome to the Playboy Club." Oh, yes, and stick my fanny out while looking sexy. One other impression. The offices had a severe lack of cordiality. So, I was Surrey Marshe. So, I had an appointment with Vincent Tajiri, the picture editor. So, big deal. Vince Tajiri was very nice. He was slight of build, with a certain oriental inscrutability about him. Okay, sorry if there's like seemingly racist things in this book because, you know, it's from 1969, so that's what they wrote. As befits his Japanese extraction. I was introduced to various people in the picture department. I didn't learn their exact titles until I looked them up later, but they were Bev Chamberlain, associate picture editor, Marilyn Grabowski, assistant picture editor, Pat Pappas, who was in charge of rights and permissions, whatever that means, and two photographers, Larry Gordon and Alexis Urba. I wondered where Pompeo Posar was. All these people were very glad to see me. I was so beautiful, and they just knew I'd enjoy myself. There were lots of questions asked. One type went like this. What did I think of the mansion? Was I in the red room? Was I having a good time? Had I ever seen a place like it? My answers went like this. Thrilling. No. Thrilling. No. The other type of questions were personal. Where was I from? When did I come to America? And how? And why? How did I like America? New York. Did I like being a bunny? Wasn't the costume a gas? Did I like Chicago? I lied only a little. After all this, I was taken to lunch. There were four of us. Larry Gordon, some girl I don't remember, Alexis Urba, and I. We went to some restaurant, which I also don't remember, and over cocktails I asked the question that had been on my mind all morning. Where's Pompeo Posar? Alexis Urba answered, He's in Europe, Surrey. I'm to photograph you. Oh no, Pompeo Posar not there. I had to go through the whole thing again with somebody else. I just couldn't. Alexis Urba sensed my reaction. I can tell you Pompeo was none too happy about missing this assignment. He feels he discovered you. You made quite an impression on him. And you do on me. Look. I looked. Alexis Urba was rather handsome, blonde, with horn-rimmed glasses. He was of medium build and seemed friendly enough. He was only 25, but he struck me as more mature than that. I figured he was of Greek extraction because of his name, but I learned later he was Latvian. Look, Surrey, I know how you feel, but everything will work out okay. Believe me. We'll talk and get to know each other, and you'll see everything will work out. She's thinking, don't be a child, Surrey. You agreed to do it. I sought a straw to grasp. I don't want anyone else around when you take the pictures. Alexis Urba smiled. There's a typo. It says Alexis Urban. Unless that's on purpose. Smiled and looked me right in the eye. I wouldn't do it with anyone there. Sorry, I can't say that. It sounds creepy. After an extended lunch, I met with Renee Rossini at her office to sign the Playmate contract. The Playmate contract. After an extended lunch, I met with Renee Rossini at her office to sign the Playmate contract. As many other things about Playboy, the $500 I expected to receive turned out to be an illusion. As Renee explained it, I would receive $2,500 for posing. The remainder was earned by doing Playboy promotions, such as opening haberdasheries and appearing at Playboy clubs. $2,500 is not $5,000, but is still a lot of money. I signed. Afterward, I returned to Mr. Hefner's fun capital. There was absolutely nothing to do. I sat in my room a while and tried in vain to take a nap. I thought about writing my parents, but I'd have a hard time explaining the Chicago postmark. So I took a long bath, dressed to go out that evening with Alexis Urba, and then went downstairs to wait for him. Some bunnies were congregated in the main room. We chatted, which means I listened to their adventures at the beauty parlor. I was so bored. Maybe I ought to go back to the gold room and order breakfast in bed. That had been a gas. Alexis Urba came in and received a big greeting from the girls. They all seemed to know him and just love him. A reaction I'm sure was an entirely genuine reflection of his sterling qualities. He had a drink, and the yak continued for what seemed an extended time. My face ached from smiling. After a while, I felt rather unoriginal, saying, "Isn't that something?" So I switched to, "How about that?" Everyone thought me a marvelous conversationalist. The evening was nice. Alexis took me to a private club for drinks and dinner. Then we went discothequing, which I enjoy. He danced well for a photographer. He drove me around Chicago, and we walked the streets and talked about many things. Chicago, each other, Playboy, Hefner, photography, the future. He was very nice, very, very nice, genuine, considerate, and fun. Oh, he tried to break rule number 709Z by making a pass, but I said no, and that was that. He didn't sulk. I guess he just wanted to know where he stood, and I guess he didn't object to the terrain. He took me home about 1 a.m. I wasn't sleepy, which I was discovering was an unfortunate condition in Hefner's house. I ran into Jean in the main room. He suggested a swim, so we swam for a while, then had a cup of tea. The swim had been something to do after all. I went to my room and slept. The third day in Hefnerland was another blockbuster. After breakfast in bed, I went to Ohio Street to see Alex. He took me into the studio to watch workmen build the set wherein I was to be photographed. It was a pink, Playboy pink, bathroom. Pink walls, pink plumbing, pink everything. I was to pose just stepping into the shower. That had been Pompeo Posar's best shot. Everybody thought this was great. Then came another long lunch with Alex and another couple. Then Herb the limo appeared and drove me back to the mansion. But I didn't go in. I was beginning to think of the place more as a prison, so I went for a long walk by myself. It was something to do. That evening, I had a date with Larry Gordon, the photographer. Dang. Busy. She's like, "I'm so bored. Like, if I had to go to that many different things, I would be so stressed." That evening, I had a date with Larry Gordon, the photographer. He was young, quite good-looking, and pleasant. Although so tall, we looked rather absurd together, but I liked him. We had several dates. He filled some of the lonely hours, and I was grateful for his attentions. That night after dinner, we drove around Chicago in his sports car. After he left me off at the mansion, I took a swim. Jean was not around. Then did absolutely nothing. I sat in the main room, bored beyond belief, and finally went into the kitchen to read a newspaper. The only newspapers in the place are brought in by the help. I'm sure tales of my boredom are hardly enthralling, but I have to tell it like it was. Being the world's #1 Playboy may be a blast for him, but visiting the world's #1 Playboy, at least for this visitor, was Dullsville. It was like watching a 3-week movie of a chess game in slow motion. It may be just me. Perhaps other people are thrilled with heroically proportioned statues, acres of oak paneling, medieval armor, and electronic gadgetry. But just in case, I recommend the visitor bring several good books and a stock of magazines. I'm not sure why Hefner's pad is so boring. It may be that it is the residence of a recluse, cut off from the world, artificially lighted and climatized, constantly cleaned and polished, wanting and needing nothing. In the house there is no night or day, indeed no awareness of time itself. I'm sure Hefner and the 5 secretaries and other employees are busy, but for the visitor it is a drudge, a total dreary drudge. Perhaps another reason for the boredom is that everything written about this place, the whole aura surrounding Hefner, leads you to anticipate a swinging, celebrity-filled, orgiastic pad of debauchery. Okay, so I didn't expect daisy chains amid the medieval armor, but I thought there'd be at least a little sin. After all, the Playboy spread on the house had 15 pictures or more. After all, the Playboy spread on the house had 15 pictures of more or less naked girls cavorting through the house, and 20 others of dancing, singing, swinging celebrities. I'm sorry, but I never saw anybody with their clothes off, and the biggest celebrity was Humphrey, who's a relative of Sammy Davis's dog. You know, the pictures may have been worth 1,000 words, but the article provided the words too. Some see the mansion as a restful retreat from their own overcrowded milieus. Others seek it out as a scene of sybaritic pleasure. The article said Hefner can't always add his presence to the pleasure, but he sees to it, even in absentia, that his house guests and visitors have a good time anyway. I'm sorry, but he didn't see to it that I had a good time, unless I was expected to be one of those who got a nice rest while there. That you can do, almost as well as in a mausoleum. I know my experience in Hefner's mansion confounds the elaborately concocted image of the place. So much ecstatic prose has been published by and about Hefner and his house in Time magazine, Life magazine, the Saturday Evening Post, and just about every other leading magazine, not to mention many radio and television shows, that sometimes I think there must be some quirk in my personality which made me find boredom where others found sybaritic pleasure. But for me, the days, almost 3 weeks of them, passed like, well, have you ever had the feeling that time was like standing still? I have. In elevators. The brief seconds I'm riding in an elevator have always seemed to me to be scissored right out of time. The elevator ride has no relationship to what I was doing before I got on or what I will do after I get off. I always had the feeling that time stopped when I got on the elevator, to resume, hopefully, when I step out. To me, my visit to Hefnerland was a 3-week elevator ride. Oh, I was comfortable. It was an extremely luxurious elevator. And unlike bunnies, my bodily functions were well cared for. Anything you want, anything. But time stood still. Starting with the 4th day, I posed for Alexis Urba, an exercise to be described shortly. The rest of the hours might be described as a frantic yawn. Yes, I think a yawn can be frantic, particularly at Hefner's house, as I tried to fill the time with aimless conversations with aimless people, watched television, ate out of boredom rather than hunger, and gained weight. Swam, had an occasional date with Larry Gordon, and slept and followed that with a nice nap. I met I met four interesting people at Hefner's house: Hugh Hefner, Mary Warren, Shel Silverstein, and Lisa Baker. Ooh. Just kicked you guys, sorry. Dang. Okay. Let me get you guys back in. I broke my tripod earlier this week, so I had to wing it. Okay. All right, if you just joined, you just fell to the floor and were rescued. So we're gonna start again there. My poor tripod. Okay. I met four interesting people at Hefner's house: Hugh Hefner, Mary Warren, Shel Silverstein, and Lisa Baker. I have no startling revelations to make about Hefner. If any reader bought the book in anticipation of such, I'm sorry. I doubt if there are any startling revelations that could be made about Hefner. After all, he has had cover articles in almost every publication. Every major publication. He writes for his own magazine and is written about in it. He's appeared on television many times and been the subject of movies. Considering the fact that he's only about 40, all the publicity must have covered just about every breath he's ever drawn. I have no startling revelations to make about Hefner because I had very little to do with Hefner. I saw him or met him only on 4 occasions, all in the company of other people. The entire conversation between us consisted of little more than hello. I know the public image of him is that of a great sexpot, possessor of a private harem of bunnies, and employing a sizable staff who scour the globe to select the most desirable females as playmates for him. Playmates for him. This image may be correct. I certainly get the impression that he has no objection to it. But I don't believe the image any more than the tales of the sybaritic pleasures of his house. I don't believe the image any more than the tales of the sybaritic pleasures of his house. Hefner never invited me for a spin on his rotatable bed. Neither did he give me the impression that his failure to ask me was a product of any particular, or even a shred of, self-denial on his part. Now, I'm quite willing to admit that his lack of interest in me may have been the result of my not turning him on. After all, he didn't turn me on either. But truly, for various reasons, I believe the tales of Hefner's sexual exploits are greatly exaggerated. I'm not trying to put Hefner down by saying this. On the contrary, I'm trying to build him up. It's truly amazing that the notion persists that Hefner is some kind of animated dildo. Even more persistent is the belief that having been a playmate, I was screwed by Hefner. The prevailing attitude seems to be that this is an undeniable fact. Therefore, there's no point in my denying it, for I'm obviously lying. I tried as hard as I know how to be honest in this book, even admitting my various misadventures. There's no reason why I'd lie about Hefner. Besides, if he made love to a dozen playmates a year, 24 bunnies who inhabit the house, 5 secretaries, and several hundred other female employees, well, I came to praise Hefner, not bury him. The first time I saw Hefner was on the occasion of the really big fun event in the house, the Sunday afternoon movies. About 6 o'clock, the furniture in the main room was rearranged to face the giant movie screen, and all and sundry guests, friends, and employees gathered. I sat at the rear to await, along with everyone else, the arrival of Hefner. A few minutes elapsed, then he appeared, Mary Warren, his special girl, at his side. He was attired in dark pants, mustard-colored sweater with a Playboy emblem decorating his breast, and a pipe. He was a handsome enough-looking fellow with a slender figure and a bony, angular face with deep-set eyes, sharp chin, and prominent cheekbones. He was very relaxed and friendly, speaking or nodding to people as he entered, and reclined in a huge, pink, overstuffed chair reserved for him in the front row, right beside the freestanding 15-foot stereo hi-fi. Mary cuddled up beside him. Then he pushed some buttons at his side, or flicked them, and the movie screen came down, the house lights were lowered, and the film rolled. It was all very impressive. I had the feeling that even King Olaf would envy such a scene. The members of the royal household and faithful retainers gathering on a quiet Sunday afternoon to share a bit of diversion with His Majesty. When the movie was over, I don't remember what it was or anything about it. I saw Alexis Urba sitting in the front row, across the freestanding stereo hi-fi from Hefner. Alex was the only person I knew, so I went up to say hi. He made room for me to sit down. He made a motion with his head and whispered, "That's the big boss. That's Hefner." Instinctively, I turned to look at him, and Hefner turned to look at us across the 15-foot freestanding... Oh, never mind. "Aren't you going to stand up?" Alex said. I looked at him in consternation. Alex repeated himself. "Aren't you going to stand up?" "Why should I?" "You can't just sit there." His tone indicated that I must have just thumbed my nose at the Pope or something. The crisis in protocol was resolved when Hefner arose and came over. Alex bolted out of his chair, and I arose too. "This is Surrey Marshe," Alex said. "We're doing a centerfold." Hefner extended his hand, or maybe I stuck mine out. Anyway, we shook hands. He looked at me, smiled behind his pipe, and said, "Hello." That was it. He passed by, spoke to a couple of other people, and left the room, sufficiently diverted by the Sunday afternoon movies. The entire incident was unreal to me, and still is. Hefner didn't do anything to provoke it, but he was... Hefner didn't do anything to provoke it. He was just a guy going to the movies. But the attitude of deference shown him was one I associated with royalty. He was clearly, obviously, unmistakably, the leader. His Majesty Hefner, the first honoring us with his presence. Perhaps it is like this with any large American business enterprise. I've certainly had no experience to know one way or the other. Hefner was the leader. He started Playboy with $600 of borrowed money and built it almost overnight into a publishing entertainment empire. I knew he ran it in an extremely personal way, overseeing almost everything that happened in it, despite the existence of several thousand employees. Perhaps it was only natural that he be afforded deference and be treated with awe. Yet I couldn't escape the feeling that it was strange. My other encounters with Hefner were equally brief. He appeared in the main room once while I sat there with some bunnies. He wore golden, Japanese-style pajamas, no robe. He said something to somebody and, like a ship passing in the night, departed. It was enough to plunge the bunnies into paroxysm of chatter. "What a man!" exclaimed one girl. "I just wish he'd look at me one time." That seemed to be the consensus. A night with Hefner would be some kind of libidinous nirvana. I said he didn't turn me on. He strikes me as a cold man. They stared at me as if trying to figure out which of my two heads had uttered such blasphemy. The only other time I saw Hefner during my first stay at his house was about 3 o'clock one morning. Jean and I were having eggs or something in the dining room. A bunny came in and sat with us. A bunny came in and sat with us. A few minutes later, Hefner appeared and also sat. He was attired in light blue pajamas with a gray stripe and a pipe. Again, no robe. The house may have impressed me as a museum, but Hefner's attire clearly indicated he felt right at home. Hefner and Jean launched into an earnest discussion of the dirty movies Jean was working on. It was an insider conversation about some films I had not seen. I had the impression they were obscure films which hardly anyone had seen. Hefner and Jean had. They shared various opinions about the artistic merits of the performances, direction, etc. As an outsider to this discussion, I tried to listen and follow it and be interested, but it went on and I got so bored with it. I didn't want to be rude, but at 3 a.m. I felt I was entitled to at least one stifled yawn. Hefner didn't notice. Sitting across the table from Hefner, I formed several impressions of him. I have no idea if they are correct. I'm willing to believe they are all quite wrong, for they are based on my own fleeting observations of him. That which has been written by and about him, and conversations about him with other people, all of whom universally adore him. Hefner struck me as a man who prefers the company of men. He was quite animated in his conversation with Jean. He impressed me as a highly intelligent. He also impressed me as highly intelligent and perceptive about movies. Although, as I say, I knew nothing about the subject. Hefner was aware that the bunny and I were present. We were included in the conversation as listeners. I had the feeling I was a decoration, a toy, attractive, nice to have around, like a lamp to be turned on and off and used when needed. Like a lamp to be turned on and off and used when needed. I had the very strong impression that he is a secure man, very sure of himself. He certainly does not want for funds. As editor-publisher of an extremely successful, much copied, and influential magazine, there is not about to be anyone to say no to him. He lives in a palace of his own design where he is the absolute monarch. If he wants anything, it comes to him. Anything you want, anything. He rarely goes out. As I get it, he leaves the premises only a few times a year and then moves in carefully controlled Playboy settings. The news and television shows come to him pre-recorded. Obviously, he can see what he wishes to see and hear what he desires. He's totally secure in the milieu he has concocted. The fact that he felt the need to manufacture the milieu, is that how you say it? Would indicate that he is not secure in other situations. His security also extends to women. He was not interested in me. His gaze, his manner told me that. But his gaze and manner also told me that if at any time he altered his views, he could have me and would. I felt that very strongly, but that was his opinion. Hefner also seemed to me to be an extremely self-conscious man. I'd said he was a cold man. That may come from his lack of spontaneity. Everything, every word, every gesture, every effect is so controlled, so deliberate, that I had the feeling that it had all been programmed somewhere. He was like a man aware that he was being constantly photographed and recorded. He was on camera all the time. He seemed to have a personal, private watchbird watching him. I had the feeling that he must be afraid to sleep, for he wouldn't be able to watch himself then. I guess he could take movies and run them back later. If someone who knew Hefner better said I was all wrong about these impressions, I would not argue. Someone who does know him and better and probably would argue is Mary Warren, Hefner's special girl. Of all the people, male, female, and questionable, that I met in Hefner's house, Hefner's offices, Hefner's clubs, she was by far, far, far the nicest. If a man can be judged by his special girl, then Hefner must be judged a grand man. Ooh. If a man can be judged by his special girl, then Hefner must be judged a grand man, because Mary Warren loved him desperately. This is really interesting. Okay. And then I lost my spot. If a man can be judged by his special girl, then Hefner must be judged a grand man, because Mary Warren loved him desperately. I use the past tense only because I've lost touch. She may still love him, I just don't know. But Hefner had special girls before Mary. Will Mary hold her man? Will Mary and Hugh grow old together? Listen to tomorrow's chapter of I don't really know Mary Warren, but I liked her very much, and for a simple reason. She was the only person in the entire Playboy organization who ever talked to me. I don't mean moving the lips and chattering like a hyena crossed with a magpie in heat. Talk there was lots of, but Mary Warren had something more. She used to show up at Hefner's mansion in the late afternoon, after she got off work at whatever she did in the Playboy offices. Maybe Hefner would be asleep or busy or something, so she'd sit in the main room, killing time until he was ready for her. We talked several times. She was a lovely girl with warm brown hair, fine, chiseled features, soft voice, and a traffic-stopping figure. More importantly, she was a giver. She was interested in me. I wasn't just somebody she met. She wanted to know me, talk to me, find out what I thought and felt, my likes and dislikes. She wanted to share with me and put me at ease and please me. She was devoid of phoniness. I have no great memory of our conversations. She was interested in Norway and my family and why I'd come to America. I mean, really interested, and where I'd lived and how things had gone with me. And she talked about herself a little, her work and home and things like that. I remember I asked if she'd ever been a playmate, and she said she hadn't. I asked if she wanted to be, and she said she would, sort of, but her parents would be terribly upset by it. I asked her if she thought I should be. It would be easier for me, she said, with my parents in Norway. I could do what I wanted. Like I say, Mary wasn't too smart, but very nice. Wow, this is a long chapter. I asked her if she loved Hefner. Yes, she said, very much. And she did. It came out her pores. It was as obvious as... What is as obvious as a woman in love? Every time I was with Mary Warren, I felt sad. I was so sorry for her. And I had no business doing so. It was her life, and I had no idea what went on between her and Hefner. I'd heard that the special girl was a one-way street, and that other males were expected to give wide berth to her, but that Hefner had no such restrictions placed upon him in regard to other females. Even if that was so, it wasn't what saddened me. Here she was, a lovely, giving person, madly in love with a recluse. He never took her anywhere. Loving him was a total waste of her loveliness, givingness, and youth. She was 22 and had been his special girl for 2 years. I had to believe she must be getting something out of it, but where was it going and how would it end? That saddened me. One of the fixtures in Hefner's mansion is Shel Silverstein. Shel Silverstein goes with the house. Shel Silverstein goes with the house like a medieval armor or Humphrey or the tiger skin rug in the blue room. That statement reflects the fact that he is frequently in the house, has some girth to him, and is rather outlandish. The most interesting thing about Shel Silverstein is that he is a walking ego. I had the feeling that everything about Hefner was contrived, but the effect was very low-key. I had the same impression of Shel Silverstein, but the effect was that of a Bavarian brass band playing in the nude for a requiem high mass. Shocking, ludicrous, and sad. It is difficult to imagine anyone else in the world like Shel Silverstein. He's a big man with important shoulders and a noteworthy chest. He shaves his head a la Yul Brynner and sports a full black beard and mustache, separated by flashing white teeth. The visual effect alone stunned me. Then he came on very strong. He had the demeanor of a chief performing his duties at the annual impregnation rites for tribal virgins. That's to say that Shel Silverstein is a caricature of masculinity. His appearance and attire declare this. So would he. So does he. He entertains on the guitar, singing what Playboy would declare to be ribald songs, but the rest of the world would call dirty. Between verses he tells ribald stories, laughing heartily at them, and, to top the caricature, all in his high, squeaky Mickey Mouse voice. The effect upon me as he entertained a group of bunnies in the main room was so shocking that I had to laugh. Shel Silverstein is a cartoonist, or, as Playboy puts it, a satirist. He travels to various places to produce features for the magazine, featuring Shel Silverstein in line drawings, Shel Silverstein in photographs, Shel Silverstein in text, all showing Shel Silverstein captivating and making out with girls. Shel Silverstein appeared at Hefner's house about the middle of my stay there. He moved immediately into the Red Room. He apparently has some sort of squatter's rights to it, and evicted Jean to the Green Room, which is somewhere else in the building. I like Shel Silverstein. He was the only person I saw in the house who seemed to be having fun. He was entertaining and amusing, both extremely rare in Hefnerland. At the conclusion of one of his song fests, he invited me to tour the Red Room. I told him I'd seen the Red Room. Then he invited me to see the cartoons he was working on. That might be interesting, so I went. I saw his cartoons. They were interesting. Shel Silverstein was not interested in my critical opinions. My impression was that he was interested, hardly in me, but in certain other talents he felt certain I possessed. I denied such talents. He wanted to know what was wrong with me. He expressed the opinion that everyone had the ability. Shel Silverstein did not seem to want to leave a girl in doubt as to his interests. I told him his interests weren't my interests. I think that dampened his enthusiasm for me, but I still liked him. I saw no reason to ignore his other sterling qualities. Lisa Baker, as every devotee of Playboy knows, was Playmate of the Year in 1967. A Playmate of the Year is supposedly the best of the girls who appeared in the previous 12 months. Playboy carries on the fiction that they are chosen by vote of readers, but I doubt if anyone believes it. But the fiction is useful to the magazine because the result is a great deal of skin. All of the previous Playmates are reprised in the January issue. A couple of months later, Playboy may have a runoff between 2 or 3 girls, affording an opportunity for more skin. Ultimately, a single girl is chosen and 10 or 12 views of her anatomy presented. With all this photography, and don't forget the Playboy calendar which provides a month-long view, the Playmate of the Year has had enough uncoverage to make her body as familiar as the average wife's is to her husband on their silver wedding anniversary. According to Playboy, being Playmate of the Year is one of life's higher privileges. She's lavish with gifts, including a Playboy pink sports car and other items. According to Playboy, being a Playmate of the Year is one of life's higher privileges. She's lavish with gifts, including a Playboy pink sports car and other items. Playboy says all this is worth $12,000, which means the girl either has to be independently wealthy or sell a lot of it to pay the income taxes. She goes on a tour of all Playboy clubs, where she signs autographs and generally shows members how she looks with clothes on. Lisa Baker came to the mansion near the end of my stay, putting up in the Blue Room. We met and had several long talks together. I came to like her better than any of the other playmates I met. She was a natural, a sweet girl, hardly an exhibitionist. She lived somewhere in the Los Angeles area. While attending a friend's wedding, one of the Fig brothers, Bill and Mel, photographers who have done many Playmate layouts, propositioned her about posing for a centerfold. She needed the money, so she did it. It was also exciting, bold, likely to be interesting, and it would make her feel beautiful. She's not a girl with a big ego. She told me she was scared to death, both of posing nude and of her parents finding out. She changed her name in hopes they never would. That was the situation when Lisa and I met in Chicago. She had posed for the photographs, and they had been accepted, but they would not run in Playboy until the November issue. She was in Chicago to do her first Playboy promotion, and quite excited about her pictures coming out and the promotions. Lisa and I have kept in touch since then, and I know a little about her. When the November issue came out, she was not pleased with the picture. Playboy reshot the whole series of photographs. Her parents did find out and were upset, but there was nothing they could do about it. I know Lisa was thrilled at being chosen Playmate of the Year, and it is my understanding that she has since become rather bitter, although I don't know the cause of it. But what do the readers of Playboy know of Lisa Baker? When she appeared in the August 1967 issue as Playmate of the Year, Playboy declared she had, quote, outstripped her able-bodied competition in a Playmate playoff. Really? Outstripped her able-bodied competition. That's hardly fair to a girl like Lisa. She was shown in a pink minisuit beside her Playmate pink Plymouth Barracuda. That was her reward for her title. Below that, spread over 2 pages, was a life-size, booby-to-head photograph of Lisa on her back, eyes closed, lips slightly parted, lasciviously offering her nipple to millions of men. 3 of the next 5 photos show her in what is obviously a man's apartment, her clothes casually discarded on a chair. In one, she's on her knees, fanny out, boobies up, elbows resting on the top of the phonograph, hair tousled, looking at the reader as if to say, "Are you sure you want to listen to music?" Another photo was her in the chair, pool table in the background, and Lisa, dewy-eyed, beseeching that other games be played. Still another has her leaning over the side of the chair, begging the reader to please sit down. The other 2 photographs were taken in a bedroom, one of them a silly pose with Lisa sucking on a sheet. None of this portrayed a nice girl I knew. The nice girl I knew. I met a few other playmates. Sue Bernard was nice enough, but she seemed silly to me, always giggling like a child. Kelly Burke impressed me as a housewife and a mother. Kelly Burke impressed me as a housewife and mother, for that's exactly what she was. She had a husband and child at the time she posed. Tish Howard, who Playboy calls its patrician playmate, was and billed as a debutante, lived up to the image. Her folks apparently had money. She was dressed to the hilt and wore a fur. She struck me as a snob. Allison Parks, who I met only briefly while she was on tour as Playmate of the Year, seemed hard and unfriendly. I've met one other Playmate. She struck me as a show-off. She was a short, hippie girl with one physical attribute, a huge bosom. I saw her in a discotheque one night, surrounded by a half-dozen guys at a table. She wore a dress scooped to her nipples. Despite that, she felt the need to put on a show, which culminated in her ripping off her wig and flinging it around. Despite that, she felt the need to put on a show, which culminated in her ripping off her wig and flinging it around while she did a coochie dance. That's the end of the chapter. Oh man. And the next chapter is chapter 8, Alexis Urba. So it looks like she's going to be doing her Playmate shoot. So thank you guys so much for listening. I would love to know your thoughts below on that chapter or how you're enjoying the book in general. Please don't forget to subscribe so that you get notifications when the next chapter comes out. And check out the playlist that has more videos from this book. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.